had to catch myself because I was emceeing. I'm having to monitor the time, and I was so engrossed in some of the speakers that I had to get back to doing my job. Almost missed my own cue, and that's how good these speakers are. They are
Right.
just phenomenal. And we have a pretty good speaker coming up now. Her name is CJ Grace. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a former BBC journalist and public speaker. She's the author of the humor self-help book Adulter's Wife and How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not. So I'm sure she's had some experience in that, right? She's also got a book called My Wild Ride, How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. So two touchy subjects there. She's a candid comic. It's a candid comic memoir, an uplifting cancer survival guide. So, man, there's 3 of us on the show today that's had cancer. So that's 50%. Those aren't good numbers at all. So this lady had a double whammy. She discovered that her husband had an affair shortly after being diagnosed with cancer. Can you imagine the mindset that she was going through? And she's got these plans in place to help people overcome that. She speaks about it. She teaches about it. She's got books about it. So welcome to the stage, CJ Grace.
Thank you so much for having me today. I
Oh, thank
really
you.
think that going through adversity is the route to BTBY, becoming the best you, because it's through adversity that you realize you can change and you can actually make your life better than before. It sounds like a cliche, but it's actually true.
It is true, which is why it's a cliche, because before it can become a cliche, it has to be said, it has to be witnessed, right? So, yes, yes. And, I tell people, we were talking about fiction books a minute ago. Somebody said that he was reading. There's always some truth in fiction, too. So, cliche or not, look for the truth in it. Look for the truth in it. So,
Right.
CJ, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I had been living a charmed life. I had my dream job as a journalist with the BBC in Britain. There I was meeting celebrities, politicians, and fascinating people who were making their mark on the world. And then I got a transfer to work for China Radio International in Beijing. And I had a fairy tale falling in love with an American I met there. And so if you'd like me to continue, I can tell you the whole story and exactly what I did to get through that double whammy that you spoke about.
Are you going to talk about that today in your session?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Because I've got a 6-part plan that I use to help me get through that deep, dark pit of devastation. And I think it can be used for any kind of adversity. I also found out a lot of stuff about breast cancer. And some of the things that I found out, I think, could be useful to the 1 in 8 women in America and actually also in the UK, where I come from, who are diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. It's a massive epidemic.
It is, and it just is. So I have to ask you a question before we turn it over to you. So you've got this accent. You explained where you're from, but you don't live there anymore. So it's bright and early where you are. Where are you at?
I'm fortunate enough to be streaming live from Hawaii. And although you can see behind me, actually, it's the Matterhorn. I have been there. It's the Matterhorn behind me, but I'm really in Hawaii, and I'm very grateful to be here. It's a lovely place to be. I also spend time in California, but I am actually quite grateful that I'm no longer living in England and I am here.
Oh, well, welcome to America. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You guys listen up, because sometimes we think things are never going to happen to us. It's not going to happen to me. But let me tell you, things do happen, and they will happen to you. So listen up to what she's got to say.
So I thought I was having the perfect life. And there I was in love with this American guy working for China Radio International in Beijing. I just transferred there from having had my dream job as a journalist with the BBC in Britain. And fast forward to our 25th wedding anniversary. Well, that was the best one ever, spent in Hawaii. And little did I know that just 2 years later, both my marriage and my health would be in tatters. My husband was openly carrying on an affair with a woman half his age whom he refused to give up. And then I got breast cancer. And it was a double whammy that left me reeling. So, my humorous self help book, Adulterer's Wife: How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, was inspired by dealing with the emotional roller coaster that infidelity put me on. My staunch belief that the best revenge is to actually get past the need for revenge was the mantra of that book. And I didn't really think I had another book in me, but getting cancer was the trigger for me to begin writing another one, My Wild Ride: How to Thrive After Cancer and Infidelity. That's My Wild Ride: How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. So when I called him out about that infidelity, my husband offered me a part-time wife position. Seriously, he did. I'm perfectly capable of loving two women at once, he declared. I'd be happy spending 2 or 3 days a week with her and the rest of the week with you. You know, I actually considered that proposal for several months, trying to get my head around it. Then I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was for the second time. I carried the dreaded BRCA gene, the BRCA gene, that Angelina Jolie had believed could be a death sentence. While I was going through chemotherapy, my husband was in Europe with his girlfriend. It was obvious I'd never be able to stomach a part-time husband. I had to let him go. Yet for my peace of mind, for my health, I needed to forgive both him and his girlfriend, because hanging on to that resentment was draining my energy. The last thing I needed undergoing cancer treatment. I wasn't going to let my husband treat me like a doormat anymore, but I needed to truly forgive him to break the emotional hold that he had on me. When we discover our partner's been cheating on us, it's so easy to fall into the trap of playing the blame game and plotting vengeance. Revenge is the opposite of forgiveness. Forgiveness allows us to move on and reclaim joy in our lives. And as I said, the best revenge is to get past the need for it. And I'm going to explain exactly why. I heard about a contractor who was so angry about his wife's infidelity that he filled her car with cement. Everybody laughs when I tell them that story. Quite impressive. Fill your cheating partner's car with cement. But where does a couple go from there? Definitely not reconciliation, and most likely an expensive, acrimonious divorce. After all, 1 minute, a partner is the love of your life. And then when you find out they've been cheating, they become an evil demon. But it's the same person, someone whom in the past you may have had a good life with, and you may have had children together. Rather than vilifying my husband, I tried to remember that he was the same flawed human being all along, with good points that originally drew me to him in the first place, and bad points that made me now want to consider leaving the marriage. Revenge is toxic. I knew it would be counterproductive for me to get stuck in that kind of negativity. Instead, I wanted to spend my life energy working on the best way to move forward so that I could thrive whether I chose to stay or go. My aim was to become a more complete, creative, and joyful person, with or without a partner. Of course, I knew this wasn't going to be easy to do. We humans are emotional rather than purely rational beings. But after discovering my partner's infidelity, making spur-of-the-moment decisions based on my feelings wasn't a wise idea. I tried to wait till I'd calmed down somewhat and felt more on an even keel. Whatever choices and actions I considered doing, I tried to remember to first stop, take a breath, and ask myself, is this serving my own long-term best interests? Nevertheless, I can't deny that finding out the man I'd believed to be my soulmate and partner for life was in love with someone else dropped me into a deep, dark pit of devastation. I'm not a marital guidance counselor or a psychotherapist, but nevertheless, I found myself developing a 6-part program to help me get off that emotional roller coaster and stop feeling like hell. It incorporated some of the advice I received from good friends who did work in the counseling field. I've used my program to get through both infidelity and breast cancer, and it can help people cope with the emotional impact of almost any kind of adversity. And the sequence of these 6 steps I'm going to tell you are arbitrary. You can work on them in any order, and like me, you may find yourself doing more than one at the same time. So here are the 6 steps. Number 1, find confidants and mentors. You need confidants and mentors with your best interests at heart. They could be friends or paid counselors. Try to have at least one who's of the opposite sex to you, as you might get useful insights that are very different from those of same-sex confidants. I learned I had to choose carefully. I wanted to be able to vent my deepest, darkest feelings to people whom I could trust would be true confidants, and they'd keep things confidential. I couldn't do that with everybody I knew. Some of my friends would have been turned off or at least uncomfortable if I'd spewed a load of negativity at them. Others were only interested in the gossip value of my breakup story, and most likely would have passed on my private, intimate details to their whole circle. Number 2, build a community of old and new friends. Cultivate existing and new connections who are friends of your own rather than friends of your spouse. I realized that during a course of a marriage that spanned 3 decades, I'd let go of most of my own close friends from college and journalism days. So much so that one dear friend of mine from England had thought she'd done something to offend me because I hadn't responded to her emails. I was too wrapped up in taking care of my husband, the small business we owned, and my children. And almost everybody I socialized with was either a friend of my husband's or was connected to our joint business. And of course, it would have been very unprofessional to have discussed his infidelity with any of these people. So I made it a priority to reconnect with all my old friends and try to meet new people, both male and female. The aim was to build friendships and community rather than finding another relationship, because I wanted to avoid rushing into a desperate rebound affair. Number 3, laughter therapy. I made an effort to hang out with people who made me laugh rather than brought me down, and I watched comedies rather than depressing dramas. And despite being a former BBC journalist, I gave up watching the news because it's all about bad news. Good news is rarely as exciting as a tragedy. Growing up in Britain, I was brought up on Monty Python's Flying Circus, which helped me notice the absurd humor of my situation, whatever was happening. And if you don't laugh, you cry. And I'd much rather laugh. That's why I fill the self-help books I write with cartoons and a lot of humor. There's even an Indian practice called laughter yoga to promote health and well-being. It combines yoga, breathing techniques with laughter exercises. Sounds like a good idea, but I would rather laugh naturally from good conversations with entertaining people and from watching comedies without having to force anything. Seeing humor in your everyday existence isn't the same thing as always cultivating a positive attitude. That's hard to manufacture. I can think of 1 or 2 people who sternly insisted I must stay positive when I was dealing with my breast cancer, who themselves manifested bucket loads of negativity when problems arose in their own lives. Yes, do whatever you can to keep your spirits up, but don't ever feel bad about feeling bad. Each side of the positive thinking debate has research to support it. For example, some studies show a positive attitude helps cancer recovery, while others indicate that positive thinking doesn't improve the outcome. It's impossible to be positive all the time, especially faced with setbacks like a failing marriage, breast cancer, or being in pain. But laughter can take your mind off your difficulties. American political journalist Norman Cousins was immobile and in extreme pain from a condition called ankylosing spondylitis that doctors thought he would never recover from. He watched stuff like Marx Brothers films and Candid Camera and discovered that just 10 minutes of induced hearty laughter would give him about 2 hours of painless sleep. Eventually, he became almost completely pain-free. Number 4 in my 6-part plan: love your body and become beautiful. Here, I don't mean that I try to turn myself into a stunning supermodel. Sadly, that would be an impossible task. I'm talking more about developing internal beauty by getting enough sleep, eating well, and exercise to get healthier and banish the blues. The standard cliche in movies of a woman who, there she is, she's just been dumped by her man and she's totally depressed, lying in bed all day, watching TV and eating ice cream from the carton. You know, that's probably the worst thing you can do to stop feeling like hell. I found outdoor exercise, especially with friends, to be a very effective antidepressant. I was staunchly opposed to taking medications for that, even though I have to tell you, when I was going through cancer, the doctors were very keen to offer me antidepressants and sleeping pills. No, thank you. One friend of mine was suffering from such a bout of crippling sadness that she could barely get out of bed in the morning. I persuaded her to force herself to get up first thing and start her day spending just 15 minutes walking in nature in a local park. She told me that adding this simple routine to her life dramatically boosted her mood. Number 5, find your passion. Work out what you're passionate about and become more of a hedonist. And when I use the word hedonist, I'm not advocating irresponsible behavior that won't serve you in the long run, or a sex and drugs and rock and roll type lifestyle. Instead, it's about making time to do things you enjoy rather than constantly keeping your nose to the grindstone. Think about what activities make your heart sing. Your passion could be art, a musical instrument, writing a book, or volunteering for a cause that you really believe in. If you've always wanted to play the saxophone in a band, I'm not recommending you should drop your day job to try to make a living as a musician, but that you should carve out some free time to at least develop playing the instrument as a hobby. Women in particular tend to put a lot of focus on serving their families and make little time for themselves. Despite the rise of feminism, it's still a common story that working wives come home at the end of the day to cook dinner, clean up, and take care of the children while their husbands relax in front of the TV. When we were married, my ex, well, he worked hard at his job, but never involved himself in domestic chores or child rearing duties. After I discovered his latest affair, I came to realize that I'd sublimated my entire personality into serving his needs at the expense of mine. I needed to focus on finding my passion and engaging in activities that brought me joy. For me, that was writing, and I combined my background as a journalist with my love of absurd humor, and my first book, Adulterer's Wife: How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, was born. Number 6, the last point: develop mindfulness. The past is gone and the future doesn't exist. Now is all there is. So I worked at trying to live in the present and become more mindful, fully engaged in what I was doing right now. This was probably the most difficult of all the steps for me, and it's still a work in progress. Although no specific religious belief is necessary, a meditation practice and or some kind of spiritual faith can be extremely helpful to work towards achieving true mindfulness. Infidelity and adversity and all kinds of problems, all kinds of setbacks, those can create a lot of soul searching, making us yearn to discover that there's more to life than what we've experienced up to the present moment. And one benefit of dealing with life's setbacks is that they can act as a catalyst to propel us further in our spiritual development. When everything is staying the same and going fairly well, we tend not to bother to ask ourselves the deep questions that lead to personal growth. Nevertheless, whether someone's atheist, agnostic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, Taoist, religious or not religious, learning how to become more mindful is an extremely valuable skill. Even without having to deal with adversity such as infidelity or cancer, It's very easy to spend our lives churning over the past, wishing we'd done certain things differently and or worrying about the future, rather than being aware of what is right in front of our nose in the present. In effect, we're on autopilot, missing out on enjoying the beauty of the natural surroundings we may be in, or the pleasant company we may be with, just because our minds are elsewhere. Rather than being fully alive, we're merely existing. The more mindful we are, the more fulfilled and contented our lives become. I describe this six-part program in more detail in my comic self-help book, Adulterer's Wife, How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not. And I've also put together a free mini ebook called Overcoming Infidelity: Tools to Tame the Roller Coaster of Negative Emotions. It can be downloaded by visiting cjauthor.com. That's cjauthor.com, where you can also find various free resources to help cope with infidelity and cancer. I include a wonderful mindfulness exercise using chocolate, and that one really resonates with me because I'm a lifelong chocoholic. The only thing you need to do it is a wrapped piece of chocolate, which is something I always have on hand. I can't take the credit for inventing the exercise. It's been used in elementary schools in Britain to teach children how to be more mindful. And if kids can do the exercise, so can we adults. So when I was dealing with cancer on top of infidelity, doing that six-part plan was even more vital for me to retain my sanity. I've already explained that my infidelity mantra was the best revenge is to get past the need for it. Well, my cancer mantra was information is power. Many cancer memoirs are dedicated to staunchly supportive spouses, but not the one I've written about my own experiences, My Wild Ride, How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. If you have breast cancer and your husband doesn't know how to cope, or worse, is unfaithful, he can be more of a millstone than a rock. The more I talked with other breast cancer patients, the more I heard that even a loving and well-meaning husband might have great difficulty dealing with their partner's illness. I knew I couldn't rely on my spouse, and I had to be my own advocate. So I embraced my inner anal BBC journalist and researched my treatment options to the nth degree, which also gave me a lot of material for my book. It's got a lot of comedy in it, but also has an extremely extensive bibliography referencing almost 70 books and over 100 articles and studies. Since I'd had breast cancer twice, once on each side, as well as having the BRCA2 gene, I have to admit that several of my friends, relatives, and probably my surgeon too, thought I was completely nuts to refuse mastectomies. But breast implant illness is very real. Even the FDA, not the speediest of organizations to deal with risky products, has issued warnings about implant safety. Nicole Deruda's Facebook support group, Breast Implant Illness and Healing, to date has over 175,000 members. That's despite a study published in the Aesthetic Journal in September 2022, claiming a major reason women complain about breast implant illness is, wait for it, they're neurotic. Seriously, that study is so bad that it's good in a Monty Python kind of way. As a humorist writer, it was a gift for me and inspired a blog on my cjauthor.com website with the title, Breast Implant Illness, It's All in Your Head, You Neurotic Woman. So go on my website and read that blog. Breast Implant Illness, It's All in Your Head, You Neurotic Woman. Some women are actually choosing to avoid reconstruction surgery altogether and go flat after mastectomies rather than having implants. So, given my own particular circumstances, was I right to go for lumpectomies rather than mastectomies? Whatever the answer is to that question, I still don't regret deciding to hang on to my breasts. Let's hope my tombstone won't read, "Here lies C.J. Grace for refusing to lop off her boobs." When Angelina Jolie's BRCA gene story appeared in the press in 2013, I felt there should have been much more coverage of the ovarian cancer risks faced by those with BRCA gene mutations, rather than focusing only on breast cancer and prophylactic mastectomies. When my gene profile was discovered, I was advised to have my ovaries removed, but I wanted to wait till I'd gone through menopause to avoid being slammed into it artificially. Instead, I regularly had an ultrasound of my ovaries and the CA125 blood test. It's a test that measures a particular cancer antigen protein that's elevated in most ovarian cancer cases. But since there are several other conditions that can cause a high reading, it's only recommended for those with a high risk of ovarian cancer. So 2 years after my first breast cancer diagnosis, I went to a relative's wedding and got talking with an old friend of the family. She told me about 3 women she knew who'd recovered well from breast cancer, but some years later had all died from ovarian tumors. It was a wake-up call for me to get rid of my ovaries and fallopian tubes, and that operation for some strange reason is known as an oophorectomy. Some women with that BRCA gene choose to have a full hysterectomy, but again, I didn't like the potential side effects of that, and I chose to have an oophorectomy instead. I did it once I'd already reached menopause, and after the operation, I noticed little difference in how I felt. Angelina Jolie wasn't so lucky. In 2015, at the age of 39, a CA125 blood test showed anomalies that might indicate an ovarian tumor, so at that point, she had her ovaries removed. Her mother also had a defective BRCA1 gene and was diagnosed with breast cancer. However, it was an ovarian tumor that killed her. So I say again, it's important to look at the ovarian risk if you have the BRCA gene profile. Well, I never burned my bra in the 1960s or 70s, but after getting cancer for the second time, I threw away my bra. Why? Well, one of the many books I read about cancer had an unforgettable title. Here it is, Dress to Kill: The Link Between Breast Cancer and Bras. Quite an impressive title. It's written by medical anthropologist Sidney Ross Singer and his wife Soma Grismeyer. They wrote it in 1994 and revised it in 2018. They claim that the link between wearing a bra and breast cancer is stronger than that between smoking and lung cancer. That's a big deal, and they make a convincing case with their research. The authors don't deny that toxins in the modern environment play a major part in creating cancer in humans, but where do toxins collect? In fatty tissue in the body. And where do all we women have fatty tissue? In our breasts. Normally, waste products and toxins would be flushed out by the lymphatic system, but a bra compresses the breasts and the sides of the body near the armpits. The garment also constricts the shoulders where the straps tend to dig in and squeezes the area underneath the breast, particularly if you're wearing an underwire bra. All this compression, according to Singer and Grismeyer, blocks lymph flow so that those toxins stay in the breast, and that can lead to pain, cysts, and tumor growth. So from 1991 to 93, Singer and Grismeyer carried out the bra and breast cancer study, in which 4,730 women from 5 cities in the US were interviewed about their bra usage. Roughly half of the group had been diagnosed with breast cancer. Singer reports, this study concluded that bra-free women have about the same risk of breast cancer as men. While the tighter and longer the bra is worn, the higher the risk rises to 125 times higher for a 24/7 bra user compared to a bra-free woman. Singer and Grismeyer also did research in Fiji, where they say there was apparently no breast cancer at all till women began to wear Western clothing, particularly in the workplace. The Fijian women who began wearing brasiers were the ones who later were diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, if bras can cause cancer, the current practice of gender-fluid young girls wearing breast binders are like bras on steroids, and I have grave concerns about the potential health risks of youngsters with developing breasts wearing those breast binders. As a 2-time breast cancer survivor, I wouldn't wish that disease on anybody. And I write more about this issue in a blog on my website entitled, Are Gender-Affirming Practices Carcinogenic? So that's on the cjauthor.com website. Take a look at my blog, Are Gender-Affirming Practices Carcinogenic? Some powerful stuff in there. A chance meeting with a woman who decades of experience in obstetric nursing and nurse social work, employed in those settings from the 1980s to the early 2000s, gave me insights into yet another problem stemming from the constriction of bras that I haven't seen written about anywhere. She found that young women who'd worn training bras while their breasts were developing tended to have inverted nipples, which made it very difficult for them to breastfeed their babies. Sadly, mainstream cancer groups have not only ignored all the incriminating data against bras, but actively denied it. They've trumpeted a study done in 2014 showing no link between bras and cancer. This research included only postmenopausal women, whom other studies had shown to be less dramatically affected by bra usage than premenopausal women. And more importantly, there was no control group of women who did not wear bras. That's like studying the relationship between smoking and cancer without including any non-smokers to compare to the smokers. Well, according to the American Cancer Society, the 5-year survival rate of women with non-metastatic early-stage breast cancer is close to 100%. That being said, cancer can be a crapshoot. Whatever treatment you undergo, whether conventional, alternative, or both, there are no guarantees, and my choices may not be appropriate for other people. I'm not a doctor, so I would never want to tell someone else what they should be doing. Yet well-meaning but annoying friends and relatives bombarded me with a great deal of unsolicited advice about my cancer. This inspired the very first cartoon in the introduction of my breast cancer book, and I'm just going to show it to you here. You can probably see some of it. It's called Friendly Advice. And some people, as you saw in that cartoon, they insisted that the chemo and radiation I was undergoing was toxic and wouldn't work. Others told me the complementary therapies I chose to do as well were pure quackery. Then a friend told me to give up dairy or else my cancer would return with a vengeance. No can do. I'm a Brit. Having milk in my tea, real milk and not some fake soy, oat or almond milk concoction, is something I would find just too difficult to give up. One person, who will remain nameless to protect his reputation, angrily declared and shouted at me that the reason I got cancer was because I was too tense and needed to relax. If his aim was to help me relax, shouting at me was not an effective method to achieve this. Naturally, I felt somewhat stressed out and negative at times during the cancer treatment process, and that's a common story for many cancer patients. However, amazingly, I'm still alive. People would get as worked up and evangelical about alternative versus allopathic medicine as folks do about politics and religion. I would have needed more than 72 hours in a day to take up all the anti-cancer stuff people insisted I had to do if I didn't want to keel over and die right away. And most people who go through serious illness find that they get this unsolicited advice the same amount as I did. So, did I make the right decisions? Again, all I can say is to quote Monty Python, and I have the Spam-a-Lot badge here to prove it. I'm not dead yet. So, if I could wave a magic wand and make that breast cancer and infidelity never have happened, would I do it? You might be surprised to hear me say, no, I don't regret having gone through the experience, bleak and difficult though it was. I'm actually grateful to my ex and his girlfriend. Forgiving them means they don't occupy real estate in my head, and I've got much better things to think about these days. I used to help my husband produce his own books, and now I've written my books, humorous self-help ones about infidelity and breast cancer. As I said, regret is not about the past. It's about the present, and I'm happy with my life as it is now. If I'd gone through the past differently, my here and now wouldn't be the same. So, breast cancer on top of my partner's infidelity taught me that I had an expiration date and nothing is permanent. I realized viscerally that life is too short to waste on holding grudges and not living the life I wanted to lead. So many people put off doing what they really want to do till tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. On my deathbed, would I care about how tidy my kitchen was, how many emails or posts on social media I'd written? No, I would want to have had a life of love and laughter that was creatively and spiritually fulfilling. I would want to have found purpose on this earth. In my writing and speaking work, I examine how to deal with adversity by using it as a catalyst to raise you up rather than be crushed. Humor plays an important part in that. My aim is to inspire ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances to find ways to make their lives fulfilling, however long or short their time on this earth might be. So, I'm CJ Grace, and if you'd like to find out more about me and my work, you can check out my comic self help book, Adulterous Wife: How to Thrive Whether You Stay or Not, and my new humorous memoir, My Wild Ride: How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. They're both available in paperback and ebook format on Amazon, and I have various resources for you. You can visit my website, cjauthor.com, to download 2 free PDFs. One is Got Breast Cancer, 10 Tips to Stay Sane. And the other one, Overcoming Infidelity, Tools to Tame the Roller Coaster of Negative Emotions. These free mini ebooks can help alleviate negative emotions arising not only from infidelity and breast cancer, but also from adversity of any kind. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a chocoholic and a committed chocoholic. Overcoming Infidelity has a PDF. That PDF, I've also included the details of how to do an easy and enjoyable mindfulness exercise using chocolate. And there's even a video on my website that you can watch to do that chocolate exercise with me. So visit cjauthor.com and follow me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at CJ Grace Author. So I hope you found my presentation helpful. And the bottom line is that whatever we've been through, there's always hope. I'm proof of that. And also, so are all the speakers who've been part of this Becoming the Best You Mastermind today, especially BTBY founder Brenda Ringwood. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak today, Brenda.
Oh, thank you for coming. You know, a lot of people don't realize the mindset that you go through when you have cancer. So then you're going through this, and then boom, you find out your spouse is having an affair on top of it. I just can't even imagine, because you don't know if you're going to live or die when you get that kind of news, and all the negativity that's going through your brain. You can't help but think that way. You know, it just is what it is. And I went through it in 2011, so I completely understand it. Didn't find anything out about my spouse having an affair. I just couldn't even imagine finding out that on top of it. But wow, so these books, I'm sure, are going to help a lot of people. You know, there's also people who their spouses divorce them when they find out they have cancer or an illness. And
That's so true, because I've done a lot of podcasts about the new book, My Wild Ride: How to Thrive After Breast Cancer and Infidelity. And it's unusual because it puts that connection between infidelity and breast cancer. And it is a strong connection both ways. Infidelity can lead to breast cancer, and breast cancer can lead to infidelity.
yes.
Um, I remember talking to a former surgeon, breast surgeon, and he said that he'd come across many cases where, you know, the women find their marriages collapse because it's too much for their husbands to handle.
Yeah, and sometimes it's easier to walk away than to deal with it.
Yeah. And women are natural caregivers. And there was a study by Michael Glantz that showed gender disparity in partner abandonment during serious illness. And it found, I think, that there was, in some circumstances, a 12 times greater likelihood for men to leave their sick wives than the other way around.
Ah, yeah.
Shocking stuff.
Yes, and you know, sometimes people equate it to, oh, they're selfish, they didn't really love you, and although that might be true, sometimes though, maybe they just didn't know how to deal with it, and they couldn't watch you go through it. I don't know what the reasons are. I'm not excusing it at all, but I mean, I would stick by my spouse. My spouse stuck beside me. So did the family, which is what we're supposed to do. It's supposed to be for better or for worse, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, I mean, that in sickness and in health vow, they are supposed
Mhm.
to keep to it. Not always do they do that.
Yeah, it is crazy, isn't it? Well, thank you so much, CJ, for joining us. I'm looking forward to meeting you. I'm gonna be in Hawaii probably next year because a friend of mine is, needing me to come over there for a little special occasion, so maybe we'll have to meet in person.
That would be fabulous,
Mhm.
and you'll
Absolutely.
enjoy the weather.
Oh, I definitely right now we have snow on the ground where I'm at, so yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you again, CJ. I greatly appreciate you coming, and you guys go on over to her website, grab a copy of those books, and even if you haven't went through anything on these books, I'm sure we know somebody that is or has that these books could benefit them too. So share it out. Thank you, CJ. Appreciate it.
Thank you.